Hey everyone, welcome to Sunrise's Cutting Room Floor. Usually what we do here is we kind of just go through our past preaching series and talk through some of the stuff that gets left on the floor, but we're doing something a little different today. We actually have some guests coming in to talk a little bit about how does church work here at Sunrise? Who makes the decisions? Who's the shot callers? How does it all work? My name is Greg, Pastor Greg. I got Elder Cody here, Elder Jonathan, and Pastor Martine as well. And we're just here to kind of talk through how does Sunrise work as a church? How does decisions be made? How do you get into those positions? And just kind of talking through that. So just kind of throw it out to you guys. How does it work? How does our church governance work?
Well, Sunrise operates very much like on most Reformed churches and how we operate, which is we are a board-driven church. So we have Sunrise, the way we have it broken out is we have an elder, a deacon, and an oversight team that are all elected positions from within the church body. Mm-hmm. So meaning that everybody who's on the board is a member of the church and have been elected to be in that position by the church membership. Mm-hmm. So it's all coming from inside the church, and we are also operating in conjunction with the pastors at the church, which would be yourself, Greg, and Martine. Mm-hmm. So working together in that realm. So that is, I would say, kind of a main point to how we operate is it is through board decisions and board driven. Now, of course, if you've been around Sunrise for any bit of time, we do have congregational meetings that we have annually at least. And those involve getting decisions and votes from the entire general membership of the church, which is important for us as leaders. So there are things that we bring to the congregation saying, hey, we are looking for a vote from the congregation here. But there are so many things that are done on a monthly basis that as a church we need to make decisions on, and things have to be a little more streamlined, that way they're made in smaller decision groups. And it even gets smaller than that, whereas deacons will bring budgets to us. As elders and oversight, we're not working hard on that budget. Deacons are working hard on that budget and then bring as a recommendation to us. And there are many other instances that go along with each of the individual groups inside of it working on their own for those decisions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think recommendation is a really important word to use there, because when we have our congregational meetings, we're putting forth those recommendations that we have spent quite a bit of time and legwork on behind the scenes, and those get approved or ratified or even questioned sometimes at the congregational meeting. But ultimately, that's where that vote occurs. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a misunderstanding there in terms of not recognizing that we've been poring over this for months and an hour and a lot of time and legwork has gone into this, so it's not a frivolous recommendation that comes forward, right? But that's what those boards are for.
Yeah, I just thought about this in the back of the church. I thought I'd bring it forward.
It's a well thought of process, yes. Yeah. So, Cory, gracias por esa explicación tan clara, y yo creo que la importancia es que funcionamos en un modelo de liderazgo reformado donde un grupo de líderes, diáconos, ancianos toman las decisiones de la iglesia, y John, como tú decías, hacemos también una reunión de toda la iglesia para tomar decisiones muy importantes. Así que cosas muy valiosas para poder aprender hoy.
Yeah, you talked about those three different groups, the elders, the deacons, and the oversight, and that's kind of how we have our, we call them a servant team, but they are board in that sense, right? And the idea is I've never seen anyone who's been on that board getting to sit on the sidelines, right? You're serving throughout the church. You're being called into different situations, and so that's why that's where that name comes from. But what are some of the qualifications and jobs of an elder? I mean, you both are elders, but you also both served as deacons as well, right? Mm-hmm. So, but let's start off with elders.
Oh man, yeah. What makes me qualified? Yeah, no pressure, John. The youngest elder on the board right now. Why don't you handle that? So elders. I mean, it kind of comes into what the responsibility of elders are, and in a lot of ways, it's an extension of the pastoral team, right? I mean, the pastoral care is a huge thing. Teaching is a huge thing, and being on the spot. Yeah, I probably should have taking a look at my phone first and gotten the passages right. But
Well, I think, we
yeah.
can look at it in a more, maybe a broad perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
Meaning that as elders, we are in charge of discipleship of the church.
Yep.
So in Acts and in the New Testament, you hear of elders spoken of. Now, as pastors, you guys are also elders, right? You are responsible for the discipleship. Now, you guys specifically have more of a full-time ministry in that and the teaching aspect that you guys are both doing on a week-to-week basis. But the elder board is in charge of that discipleship, training, teaching. That has much more to do with the spiritual side of what we have going on here. And I say spiritual side because then deacons, who also deal in this realm, but they have much more the functional day-to-day operation of the church. So the deacons are in charge of the building. They're in charge of when maybe cases come up that people are struggling financially or in need of some help from the church. You know, we go back to early Acts where they were, the disciples put well-trained, honorable men who were in charge of distributing food to the widows and to the orphans and all those who are in that. That's where the deacon kind of role comes from.
Yeah.
And that's where our deacons operate a lot
Right.
in budgets and financial and in the taking care of making sure all of our, when something's broken here at the church, hey, making sure it gets fixed. But also when somebody's coming in and they're struggling with a financial problem, they're the ones to sit down with them and really work through that. And then as elders, we work much more along the line of discipleship and training and teaching. So also when you come to a part in your life or where maybe it's not a financial need, but it's been a loss in the family or some very hard things that are impacting us, that's where elders come in as far as being able to point to Christ being there for us no matter what. But I mean, there's teaching that goes along with that, and there's so much more that we are trying to be in charge of pushing, you know, of doing what God has prescribed for teachers and leaders to do.
Right. And Cody, one thing, John, also that we as elders do, it's when somebody asks, how can I be baptized? What is the process? So that is also a responsibility that falls on our shoulders to guide this person to make sure that they understand what it is to be a disciple of Christ and what baptism is and what it is not. El trabajo de los ancianos, ¿verdad? Como tú decías, tiene que ver mucho con la parte espiritual, la educación en la iglesia, el crecimiento espiritual, y nos tocan hacer cosas como los bautismos también.
Yeah, and to piggyback on what Cody was saying too about the function of deacons, especially with hardship cases, typically they'll bring an elder in, you know, not necessarily to look at the budget side of things, but to also help out. You know, oftentimes, you know, there's prayer that's needed there, and there's an underlying spiritual element, and so the elders help fill that role too. And you know, for you guys as pastors, you know, serving a congregation even of this size, there could be a lot of people asking for prayer.
Yeah.
And so we're support for you guys too to say, you know what, hey, we want to make sure we've got an elder to help with follow up on this, more prayer, right? Or even if it's visiting someone in the hospital, you know, you guys are busy too. So there's 4 elders you can reach out to and say, can someone get over there right away? This family needs somebody there to be present. So we're there to assist in that side of the spiritual aspect, the health side of the church.
Claro, John, todo esto lo que es las visitas a los hospitales, cuando alguien está enfermo, si Greg o yo estamos ocupados, ustedes pueden ir y orar por las personas. Esa es la bendición de tener un equipo de ancianos.
Yeah. And another part of it too is prayer for the congregation, whether they know it or not, right? I mean, everyone who's come in and that we know and have, you know, spent time getting to know, they're being prayed over by the elder team on a pretty consistent basis.
Yeah, and that's so key. One of the things I love about the way that our setup is the community-based like way everything is done, right? It's not just based on the pastors getting all the work done, but it's really a team effort when it comes to the way that Sunrise works. Is, you know, the elders are right side by side with the pastors, and then we're all next to the deacons, and there's just this working together, rubbing shoulders as we get to do ministry together. And I think that's the beautiful thing. No one's the bright shining star up there that's like, I'm doing it all, right? We're all doing parts of it. God's calling his people, his congregation, do his work. And I love that part of how we function as a church.
Yeah, and Greg, one more thing. So we as elders, we meet once a month to talk about the spiritual needs of the church, and that is very important. That I think that keeps us, on track, on task of what really matters on the spiritual level of the church.
Yeah, and then there's that third branch, right? The oversight team. And really the qualifications for an oversight team member is someone who's been an elder before, and they're kind of overseeing the two different groups, the deacons and the elders, making sure that they're doing what they're called to do, that nothing's getting overlooked. And they're kind of also a bit of the HR department for the staff here. So if there's, certain staff members need some help around some of that, have insurance questions, or got complaints about, us. They don't have to come to us; they go to them, right?
Exactly.
So it just kind of gives that kind of aspect of, their duties. So. And that's some of their qualifications. And if you want to look up the Bible stuff, it's 1 Timothy chapter 3, 1-7 is about elders, 8-13 is deacons. Titus 1 has more on eldership, but I think it's really, when it comes to us, what we're looking for is we see the fruit of God working in people's life. People do need to be a member here at Sunrise for at least a year in order to show proof that they're walking faithfully, right, and that their family is doing well and being cared for by the individual, and so and that they're a man of God, right? So
I think there's another important point that we have to make. So there's a time where the first time that somebody is voted in as being a deacon or as an elder, you have go through what's an ordination process.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So you'll see that up front. This is typically when somebody will come up and they're being ordained as an elder, as a deacon, and there's some questions you have to answer and affirm at that being that. There is more responsibility there, as in most leadership positions, right?
Yeah.
And so once you've done that, if you are voted in or brought to be an elder or deacon for a second time, you've already been ordained. So now you are simply installed for that term, right? So that maybe is why sometimes up front you'll see somebody who's becoming a deacon or becoming an elder, and there's a couple of them up there, and one of them is being ordained, and the other one is just being installed.
Yeah.
Well, it's because they've already answered yes to those questions previously. We've received them as a nomination, because this is how we do it.
Yep.
From our church, right? The church congregation nominates people to be elders or deacons for those positions, and as the elder and deacon, existing elder and deacon board, they will view those nominations, make sure they meet all the criteria, just like you talked about.
Yep.
Have been a member for at least a year, aren't going through what we would maybe consider to be maybe some struggling times, right, in their family life, because it requires more to be than also not just shepherding your own family, discipling your own family, but helping with the church members too, right? And so they will be nominated, and then the outgoing, usually the outgoing elders and deacons, there'll be a small board there that will run through an interview process and come with a recommendation to the larger servant team, all 11 of us, of recommending, hey, these guys are ready to be deacons or elders. And then that time we bring it as a recommendation to the congregation, right, where it's voted on. So that's kind of the process. So that's why sometimes you have maybe men being ordained versus men being installed, right? So.
Sí, Cory, qué buena clarificación a eso, porque hay ancianos que vemos en la iglesia el domingo en la mañana que los ordenamos y a otros los instalamos. La palabra instalación es cuando un anciano ha sido ordenado previamente. Entonces, por eso no requerimos hacer eso. Muy importante. Guys, how long do you serve for as an elder here at Sunrise?
Yeah, terms are 3 years. And so there's 4 on each board. So you'll have 2 years in a row where there's only one coming off and one coming on. And then you have a year where 2 go off and two come on to each of those boards. So it's always kind of revolving. But yeah, a 3-year
3 años
term.
de compromiso.
Correct.
And the oversight is made up of already ordained deacons and elders, right? So they're really just being installed in the oversight one. They've answered those questions, and
Yep.
and I think for me personally, how I see the oversight is support for you guys, but also support for us as an elder. When I have something, I have a question or something, I'm working through something, I don't want to bother you guys with it or anything, or maybe it's something that I know an other elder has gone through. I'll give them a call because they are on that time, and I'll give them a call and to get some advice from them. It kind of, it just brings a little more to the table, a little more of experience whenever we're going through those things. And same with deacons. You know, deacons have a deacon oversight member who they can go to
Yeah.
with questions.
Yeah, and it's just that safety net, right, where we can be not having to do this by ourselves, and that's one of the things I love is the key. I think the key word here is accountability that we all share with one another. You know, we're not a church that's pastor driven where we get to make all the calls and decide everything. In fact, even when we decide on what we want to preach on, we bring it to the elders and we submit it to you guys and say, this is where we feel like God's calling us to go. And we look for that second yes, right? To say, yeah, we see that God can work through that, right? You're sticking to scripture, good job, right? and we're going that direction. And so I love that balance that we get to share with one another where there's almost like this, there's no power play that anyone can take and say, well, I'm in charge here, right? I'm going to make the decisions and do this. I think Pastor Russ used to talk about the field of play that we get to allow each other, right? That you guys kind of say, hey, you're a pastor. We are ordaining you to do this. Now go do it, right? Play within that realm. And we check in to make sure we're staying within that field of play. But I think that's just a great way that we have it set up here.
I love the power of the group, because I remember in some instances, you know, I got a crazy idea, a very good idea. And once you bring this beautiful, amazing idea to the board, because of the wisdom of the elders, the wisdom of the deacons and everybody together, then you realize, oh my goodness, I am so glad I didn't make that decision on my own, but I had the support of everybody.
I think that goes along with when we're, you know, not even preaching at the front, but even the curriculum that we're using in classes. You know, sometimes I think, oh, this is great, and you bring it, everybody looks at it, and you're kind of like, oh, maybe that's not where we are as a church right now, or what we're needing, right? I think a point that, you know, you've been really good at, and I know Russ and Martine in the past is, you know, we try to do with head, heart, and hands, right? So we're always trying to do stuff that impacts all those different sides of what we do, and not just focus on too much of one thing. And that goes for our classes too, and what we teach and everything there, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. So, you know, we talked a little bit about how people get onto the team, but one thing that I think I would love to make sure we hit on is, you know, it is a call, right? It's a call from God to step into this position. And just because your name goes into the box doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to be on the servant team. Walk us a little bit through that process of what it was that for you, like to receive that call. What was it like to join the team? Your experience through that.
Oh man, that's getting back there in the memory banks.
Back in the day.
Yeah, it was. It's coming up on 10 years now since I first got that call. But yeah, the process typically for electing a new board member, that starts right after our second quarter meeting, right? So that could be late July, early August, where then we start to discuss, okay, who's coming off at the end of this year. Now you're being appointed to the committee to go locate those replacements, right? So those conversations are already starting by, you know, early September, late August, to be recommended by our meeting, our membership meeting, which is in November every year, right? So again, that recommendation is not, you know, last minute. Oh, hey, by the way, I think this guy would be great. This is months in the works of you know, interviews and meeting with people and asking them point blank, are you willing to serve? And typically it starts, I got a call, I want to say it was Aaron Oliver who called me at that time. No, he was still on. Anyway, someone else, but they just ask, you don't have to answer me right now. Are you willing to serve? Not, do you think you'd be really good at this, but would you be willing to consider it and come in for a
Are you
follow-up,
willing to
right?
are you willing to pray about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just pray about it. Don't give me the answer. I'm going to call you
It's a real
again
low
in a
bar
week.
that they set for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I can pray about it. That's not too much to ask. And then it kind of goes from there. So you've given it some thought, and then hey, the next call a week later is going to be what are you thinking, right? And it's like I don't know. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm ready for this, right?
I think
I'm in
that's
my
everybody's.
mid-20s.
That's
Yeah.
everybody's. Whether you're in your early 20s or whether you're in your 40s, getting that call. If you haven't done it and you pray about it, and a lot of times you'll. I mean, this is what I did, and I think I've talked to some other guys. You'll open Scripture as to we're talking about First Timothy and Titus, and these verses that are giving you the outline for being an elder or deacon. You read those things, you go, "Oh man, I don't know."
Well, at the time, it's talking about like having raised children and where they. I'm like, I don't even have a 1-year-old yet, and she was pretty easy before she was 1, but after that was a disaster.
She had
So
no
maybe I
opinions
wasn't.
yet.
Maybe it was good timing. A year later, they would have been like, that kid's crazy. No, no, you kind of pray through that, and typically those guys who are on that committee, the search committee, they're really easygoing about it. They're easy to talk to, and they walk you through it, right? I mean. They know that it's going to take time. You're going to step into that role. So, there was an interview process. There are a few other names. I was fortunate enough to be put forward as a deacon. Got served my 3-year term, came off, and then the next time I was called was about being an elder. So it was the freak out all over again. Like I just got my feet wet doing the deacon thing.
Yeah.
Now here I am 33 at the time to be an elder seems a little too young to me, but
Well, I think one of the things that they do, one of the things that the board really looks at when you're going through this is who's going off and who's on the board still. So what is typically, it is a factor into it, is you want experienced leaders with maybe some newer leaders.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to learn. I'll say it. I came on the deacon board, and Steve Skeenstra was on at that point. I mean, and that was where I learned the most from. I learned real quick. If I just keep my mouth shut and pay attention to what he's doing and we follow along, I'll kind of see how this goes, right?
Yep.
And processes and everything. And that was the same thing even coming in on the elder board.
Yep.
Is when I sat and I really learned. I mean, and I felt on the elder board, you even have more with pastors sitting there with you and talking through this. It gives you an insight as to how to work these things. And none of us are perfect coming into this. We are all sinful men, right? But yet we're trying to honor God with this decision. And this, sometimes a challenge I have felt, is the best way to challenge ourselves and move forward. If we never challenge ourselves, then we're never going to get better, right?
Amen. Yeah.
And that even goes as being an elder. I mean, it's not always perfect in what we're doing. There's a lot of mistakes that are made, but it has definitely helped in shepherding my family. And then that time in shepherding my family has turned back around and helped in shepherding the church, right? And I think it really has helped, and that's a big difference. I'm from my first term as elder.
Yeah.
And the other thing in terms of selecting leaders, our church is unique. We are a bilingual, multicultural, multi-ethnic church. Basically we are like a mirror of Tulare. That's what it is. And we have some deacons who are either bilingual or speak Spanish, and elders too. We have bilingual elders as well. So that is such a blessing because we are serving everybody. We are a church community, and our community is as diverse as our churches. So we want to be ready and prepared to serve the needs of our spiritual family. Lo lindo también de nuestra comunidad, de nuestra iglesia, que es tan única, es que somos bilingües, que somos una representación de Tulare. Hay diáconos y hay ancianos que son bilingües o que hablan español nada más, y eso es algo muy lindo que nos hace únicos. Very unique, our configuration too.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the idea that, it's a calling at a certain time, right? And so sometimes we will have some people who, we interview and we ask, hey, are you willing to serve? And, sometimes God's not calling them at that time. It doesn't mean that, hey, there's something that we see that's wrong or there's anything negative of them. But, we just feel like, hey, we actually feel like God's calling this other individual at this time. And sometimes we're actually being pretty strategic and saying, I think this person will be great next year, right? And that's a key person that we want to save for then. And so, yeah, even as people are being selected, I think that's just something to keep in mind as we do this interview process. Is like, you didn't just like get fired from the job, right? Sometimes we're just like, hey, we see this as an opportunity for you in the future, and want to see how God's going to use it that way. So,
Yeah.
important thing to understand.
I agree, and I think right now actually we're situated in a, for us historically, we have a handful of people who are quality candidates who could fulfill those roles. Almost too many to put in at one time, right? So
Which
that's
is a good problem
It's
to
a
have,
really good
yeah.
problem to have, to know that there's a group of men who I think are willing and able and capable of serving coming in. So yeah, definitely looking forward to the next cycle of leadership.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, definitely.
Yeah.
And we've had times where it's been the opposite and it's been tough.
Yep.
And that's where we've sometimes asked people to stay on an extra, 3 years. And that's always a hard thing, but something that I don't think we have to do anytime soon, for sure.
Yeah.
What has been your guys' experience being on the servant team? The pros, cons, all in between? What's been your guys' experience?
Good question. Touching back on what I said before, a lot of the pros are the challenges you get from it, right? And when you sit and discuss with, and we really kind of talk about what are our goals, what do we want to see, and when we're looking around at our congregation, and I'm, as I'm sitting in the back, sometimes praying for this congregation, praying for people as they walk in, thinking about like, where do we need to be going, and seeing that, and try and then offering some of those stuff, and to see people move in their faith, and to see children growing in their faith and making that public declaration for themselves. That's the most rewarding thing, and not rewarding because it's anything we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. But rewarding that almost in spite of us, God is continuing to further that kingdom.
Yep,
Right.
yep.
And, trying to do everything we can, to help with that. And I think that's probably that's by far the biggest pro that goes in. Cons are sometimes is you can come away from some things thinking, man, right? Like, and I mean, I'm sure you guys drive home daily sometimes with that, right? But even with that, and this is part of the maturity, I think, that, in being in leadership and being on these boards, is the understanding of like, God's got it.
Yep.
Right. I mean, and I think even that, that con that we have sometimes, just going like, are we doing what we should be doing? Or am I doing enough? Or should I have done something here? Or, should we have met with that person? Should I have pulled that person aside and had those conversations? And then you second guessing yourself, realizing, listen, if I listen to God's call and honor where God is convicting me on that, whether it turns out great or not, in my eyes, God's going to continue to honor and bless us if we're trying to honor him, right? That's, it's a pro and con, both of those, but I feel like they both work out of pros in the end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, the pros and the cons definitely mingle a lot, right? Because the challenges are some of the issues you see are, it's just hard, right? People are coming in with questions, or they're struggling, and it's like, I don't know what to do, and we're sitting there going, I don't have the answers, but we know God does, right?
Yeah.
And so working through that, from the human end and seeing the difficulties is always hard, but then you get to see the Spirit move a lot too. So that turns into the pro at the end, right? The good that comes out of that in spite of us. It wasn't our doing for things working out in the end. Aside from that, there's just times where the church could be struggling through something too, where the commitments and time. It is a service, right? And we're Greg's and we're all parents, right? And life is busy, so there's times too where you're like, man, I'm missing out on something at home. We got to address this thing, but that's the service. But definitely, again, the blessing that comes out of that is seeing God move and seeing Sunrise continue in its mission, in its journey to serve this city, to serve this congregation, and I love the family feel of our church, right? I mean, greeting is one of the fun jobs I get to do on Sundays once in a while, standing by the door and seeing everyone come through, saying hello. I love the family feel that we've got here, across cultural lines, across social and
Language,
economic lines
yes.
and language, but yeah, I try my best to say "Hola, como estás" to as many people in the morning as possible, right? But you know, and if I do it well, they think I know more Spanish than
then
I
you get
do,
in
right?
trouble.
Then it's no, I'm done. That's all I got, right? But you know, but it's fun, right?
Right,
And yeah,
right.
Jimmy and I, the language barrier is tall, but we're buddies and we give each other a hug, and it's great, right? I mean, it's so fun.
Yeah, Greg, you know, I think for me as an elder pastor, one of the things that I value and treasure is that I don't have to give my opinion. My opinion doesn't matter, but it is number one, God's opinion, His word, and then the wisdom of the group. You know, Proverbs, it's full of verses where advises not to be so into ourselves. Don't be wise in your own opinion. So the accountability that we have with one another, to me, my goodness, that is a treasure. To know that that I'm not going to mistake. I'm not going to make a mistake because I trust the wisdom that the Holy Spirit is guiding the team to make. So that is so comforting and so freeing, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Any last encouragement that you would give to anyone who's who's watching this video and starting to feel the tug or got that phone call of,
Or
will you pray about this? or will get that phone call. What would you guys say to that individual?
Yeah, definitely pray about it, right? I mean, think about it. Don't take it lightly. It is a responsibility, but the progress that we've seen from so many guys who have accepted that ask and taken that on is always it's amazing, right? I mean, guys come in and say, I don't know if I'm ready. And it's like, hey, we think you're ready. And then just watching that spiritual growth over the following 3 years is, it's always amazing. It's incredible. Yeah. So that would be one of my encouragements is, you know, feeling like you're not ready or you're not there, or, you know, you maybe see some of the guys on that board and think, well, I've been a Christian as long as them. Don't worry about that, right? Pray through it. And we're here to help each other. And it comes back to, you know, people see elders and deacons in the Bible, but what is this oversight thing? Well, that's another layer of that continuity and that added wisdom of guys who have been doing it for a long time to lean on. And those guys are going to come around you and help you not just understand the day-to-day tasks of serving on this board, but also they're going to pray with you. They're going to encourage you. They're going to, you know, we're all a team. We're all in this together.
Amen. Yeah.
I think being willing to accept a challenge. I mean, it's not always easy. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, yeah, this is easy. Don't worry about it. It's just going to go right along. That is not the case, right? Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, right? But as men, we have to be able to accept this challenge. Now, we can talk honestly. We were talking about eternity, right? We were talking about eternity for ourselves. We were talking about shepherding a family, right? Now we're talking about shepherding the church, right? And so in this, there's no bigger responsibility and there's no greater blessing, I believe, right, in that. And so having that opportunity, I don't want to say it's even like, you know, being, you know, getting that phone call and, you know, are you ready to do it? No, it's having the opportunity, right, to be there and to be with other men who have answered that same call and said, I'm ready for this. I'm willing to do this. And, you know, and to then challenge each other in this and to see your own growth that's going to happen is I think it, you know, the more the mindset that if we move ourselves to, then we're ready to really go after it versus like, hey, I'm just going to be pulled along. Yeah. I'm going to be helping pull, right? So
yeah, and trusting the Holy Spirit that if he's calling you to it, he's going to equip you as you're getting into it, and he's the one that's going to lead his church, right? And ultimately, from the servant team, from the pastors, to just being in the congregation, it's God's church, right? And he's leading all of us to do his holy will. So, hey, thank you guys so much for this time to just talk about church. And anything else, Martin, before we wrap up?
I don't think so, no. So super grateful. I think this is very important as we move forward, you know, and you will be probably getting a call. This may be a good resource for everybody to understand how we function. So John and Cody, we appreciate your time and your leadership too on setting this thing up. So.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hey, we will see you guys next Sunday.